This evening's session, Stephen Jones will be in conversation with Peter Phillips of Project Censored, with Jim Hoffman, Paul Ray, Jeanette McKinley, and Jenna Orkin. So that's at 6:30. But let's take a couple of questions right now so we can get started here. We have, right here.
If you are totally comfortable with the idea, the dust that came off from these explosions is finer than anything that's ever been recorded from what I've heard. And I was wondering, in addition to these prepositioned, the controlled demolition that brought down the towers, have you analyzed the cells of this dust to see if, well, I heard of HARP technology, if there was any other type of technology in addition to that that was involved?
Okay, that's okay. First of all, the pulverization of the dust has been looked at by in Gordon Ross's paper. He talks about that a bit. As you can see, I'm looking for specific elements and metals. And the pulverization size, I don't have a great deal of comment. I remember Tom Cahill at UC Davis mentioned that the particulates coming out were very small, abnormally shifted, in other words, towards the fine particulates. So there has been some observation of that. But that's a little different because that's after the collapse. I don't know if anyone who's looked at that from the dust from the collapse. It's certainly a good thing. Now, one thing I have done is I asked an independent lab to look at the fine dust compared to the coarse material and compare the content. So that's sort of addressing your question. But I realized from the second part of your question, there's more to it. You're talking about, as someone else asked me earlier, Dr. Wood says maybe there's a beam of laser or microwave from space or something that came down. She says instead of thermites. Well, I'm just saying there's a lot of evidence for thermites. And on the other hand, some exotic laser or laser beam. I'm one that's open to suggestion, but boy, there better be some pretty good evidence, And I haven't, it looks to me like the thermite explanation fits the data quite well, and so that's where I stand on that. But plus the fact that it takes a lot of energy. If you're sending a beam of laser from space, you've got to have an enormous energy source in space to do that. And that's been looked at. It's tough. It's a tough problem. It's almost ruled out there. I don't think we have a weapon. Thank goodness.
We have another question up here, and then we'll come back down there.
Hi. I noticed when you described the situation with the World Trade Center, you talked of 3 buildings, building 1 and 2. I've got a German site that I looked at, and it says that at the same time that building 2 fell, there was an explosion in building 6, which blew out the center 8 floors. Also, the next day, WTC-3, the Marriott Hotel, exploded in the same manner. So I thought that in relation to your talk, it would be good to not just limit it to just those 3 buildings, but to realize that this looked like a whole plan for the whole center. And, okay.
Building 6, you're right, is very curious. As you look at the aerial photograph, which I could go back to, there's a big hole in the center of building 6. And there needs to be more study on that. I agree with you there. Until that study is done, in other words, we have the right to reserve judgment. That's the same thing I do with the Pentagon. With the Pentagon, until we get more data, I'm reserving judgment. I don't think it was a missile that was person from the data I have seen. I did the Pentagon. I do want to see data. I'm just the guy that likes hard evidence, whatever it is I'm getting. Include video, I think.
So we'll take a couple more questions.
He's doing the mic. Are you doing like?
Yeah, I'm doing it.
Okay, that's fine.
Dr. Wood's investigation also reveals that much of the towers became dust, not just the concrete but the steel. And thermite cuts through steel, it doesn't explode and turn steel and concrete to dust. You should think that using the seismic evidence, how would you explain that?
Well, now, let's look at the data again. You're saying that much of the steel turned to what was evaporated. Can you give me evidence for that? I don't know the evidence. In fact, the seismic signal will not tell you.
Recorded when the towers fell was only 2.3. The Seattle Kingdom, which has 1/100th of the potential energy, recorded also 2.3.
Well, that doesn't mean that the steel was turned to dust.
The steel itself would cause a seismic signal more than 2.3. Because the steel.
That's an interesting statement, but it needs to be demonstrated. I mean, you can't just say that. In other words,
Calculate. That's rather a calculation, though.
Okay.
I've looked at her side.
We have another question here, so you can carry on your conversation with Dr. Jones after the session, and you can debate with him at that point.
Got it. I do have one quick to go on that. She also talks at her side about, like, the calculations need to be done more. But the other thing is the cars, which I talked about, those look very much like thermite for the reasons I explained. She says that's a laser beam hitting things, or a laser. But no, that would not account for the pot marks in the plastic and the corrosion in the steel like thermite does. So really, I think that already the thermite explanation is much better. Plus, she needs an energy source for her high energy and some place where it exists. I'm sorry, we need more data to support that. And the same thing with no plane sitting in the towers, which Judy Wood supports. I do not support that because there's great evidence, including the swaying of the second tower, the south tower, as it was hit, and the debris. You see, I mean, it's all these evidences. I'm sorry, I find myself in disagreement with Judy Wood for the reasons.
We have time for one more question here.
Professor Jones, would you say that the energy released by thermite and possible cutting charges would be enough to cause large structural members to be flung as far as 300 or 400 feet away from the building? And if not, then what would account for that?
Well, explosives would. And remember super thermites, the finely powdered form of the thermite is explosive. It's very high energy density, and it is explosive. And one of the reports I saw said it compares favorably with the conventional monomolecular explosives. This is not monomolecular, obviously, but when it's finely powdered, it will explode and do the same effect, hurling these beams horizontal, which, by the way, is very important evidence for explosives.
Unfortunately, we're running over schedule right now, so we have to limit some of the questions. However, Jim Hoffman's session is going to be beginning within the next 10 minutes or so. If you'd like to speak with Stephen Jones, you can feel free to do that.